What's up, guys? It's Ray J back with another video, and in this one, I want to break down what's happening with SPY, Tesla, and the overall market. I'm going to break down some big things that are going on involving Tesla news, what President Trump just said involving the tariffs. That's very important. What you should be watching for heading into tomorrow as I give you guys my price predictions. Just know that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I'm saying as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out my Moomoo link. Moomoo is an amazing global brokerage account that consists of many exclusive offers. If you guys deposit $100, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks. If you deposit $2,000, you're guaranteed 25 in total. And deposit $5,000, you're guaranteed 60. The offer ends on June 3rd. As long as you keep the money in the account for at least 60 days, you'll qualify for all these benefits. You also get an 8.1% APY on uninvested cash. Also, keep at least $100 in the account and you'll qualify for free level 2 data. That's very useful for understanding the options chains and what's going on with the overall market environments to improve your trading and investing. Anyways, check out my links down below. Now let's talk about what's happening with the market. So I just want to mention that the market's been doing a very good job at pushing and pushing and pushing as lots of buyers have been stepping in. And we're still seeing a lot of optimism about the potential tariff deals and such that's helping this market push. Now, despite the fact that the market's pushing, I do want to give you guys a warning for Tesla and the others that there's going to be a very big resistance right over here as we get very close to this 292 area. And there were about three instances in the last couple of weeks where Tesla actually rejected up between 285 and 292. So you want to be very careful as we try to push a bit higher. I still think Tesla has some juice left. We might try to go a little bit higher, but like I said before, you want to be very careful at this resistance, especially given what news is coming out. So let me first talk about the news and I'll break down the charts in a lot more detail. Keep in mind that when it comes to Tesla, there was some good news that came out on Friday about how the Trump administration has announced that it wants to speed up the deployment of FSD by basically being a little bit more lenient when it comes to regulations. So beforehand, Tesla had to report every single accident when it comes to the robotaxi being involved. Now they have to still report the majority of them, but then some of the more minor accidents don't have to be reported. So this could make things a little bit more at least unsafe in the eyes of the NHTSA, which is what they said. But you have to keep in mind that does not necessarily mean that FSD is going to be unsafe forever, because Tesla's team are still working very hard on improving it on a daily basis. And then they still have to report fatalities and lots of major accidents. It's not like they're going to be free from all of that. So in my view, this is technically good news for Tesla, not good news for the NHTSA, who love to just kind of call out Tesla and any kind of defects they can try to find. It may make things a little bit more difficult for them to find defects, but keep in mind that this could help Tesla deploy FSD sooner, and this was some good news. Once again, guys, even if it does make things a little bit more difficult for the NHTSA to find defects, it still benefits Tesla because they could deploy their tests a lot quicker. And then simultaneously, Tesla's still going to work very hard to make it as safe as possible. This does not necessarily mean that FSD will be super dangerous all of a sudden. It does not mean that, even if mainstream headlines try to say that, okay? On top of this, there's been some more news coming out from Tesla's CFO about how Tesla's going to be focused on bringing in cheaper models to the market very soon. They're going to be using lots of molding techniques to improve production mechanisms, and then they're basically planning on launching it as soon as June. So that's going to be some good news for them as well. That's part of why Tesla's pushing. Tesla's also encouraging Canadian customers to explore the pre-tariff inventory online before the tariffs make the prices go up. Once again, kind of affecting the supply chains and such. So that's what's happening so far. Good news for Tesla, at least thus far. Now, in terms of our data, keep in mind that Guggenheim gave Tesla a sell rating. Stifel gave Tesla a buy rating, so mixed views so far. The price-price ratio is going up because Tesla has a lot of strength compared to the market. The market was up 0.7% on Friday, but Tesla was up 10%. That's why we're seeing this ratio going up. Tesla's building a lot of strength. Mondays tend to be green about 52% of the time, which is an optimistic sign for tomorrow. And then we tend to see more volatility at noon and also during the second to last hour of the trading day. Besides that, there's not really anything else coming out in terms of data. I also want to add that in terms of the market on Friday, we had a very mixed day. Some green for tech. We saw Google, Microsoft, Meta, and many of them in the green, but some tickers, such as in the finance sector, were more red. So keep that in mind. Very, very mixed market so far. Now, with President Trump, he did say some important things. And just as a reminder, I only talk about him because he affects the stock market and the overall economy. So that's why it's important to know what he's saying. President Trump mentioned that when tariffs cut in, many people's income taxes will be substantially reduced, maybe even completely eliminated. Focus will be on people making less than $200,000 a year. Also, massive numbers of jobs are already being created, with new plants and factories currently being built or planned. He's saying this is going to be very big for the US, and that's what President Trump has been insisting. On top of this, he mentioned that more than 90 countries are negotiating with the US right now, and that they're going to be making some big deals. President Trump said, and this is his quote, other countries have to make a deal, and if they don't make a deal, we'll set the deal because we're the ones that set the deal. Scott and Howard and myself and others, we're going to be setting the deal. That's what President Trump is saying. There's going to be a lot of deals coming. On top of this, there's been a lot of talk from other members of Trump's team. So I think we also had the Treasury Secretary mention that 10 days ago, this was the worst April for the stock market since the Great Depression. 10 days later, the NASDAQ is now up for the month of April, and we haven't seen any headlines saying that the stock market had the biggest bounce ever. So he's just trying to say that things are very biased against them. That's his opinion, so I just want to put that out there. Then President Trump also said that the tariff money is going to be reducing taxes, and he's very excited about these deals that are coming. That's what President Trump said. President Trump also mentioned that he's going to be meeting with many leaders, especially in the EU, to once again negotiate these tariffs and these deals. And then there were a lot of officials from Beijing, China, saying that there's no negotiations going on between the US and China. Nothing's going on in this and that. But President Trump came out and he's saying that no, actually, Xi, the leader of China, called him and they had a good discussion. They had a good meeting about what's happening with the tariffs. They discussed trade and tariffs. So President Trump claims that they're actually negotiating. They're making a lot of progress. And last week he said that within 2 to 3 weeks there should be a deal coming. So that's some big news. That's what he's been saying. So keep that in mind. On top of this, Monday, April 28th, 2025 is going to be tomorrow. At 10:30 a.m., we have the Dallas Fed Manufacturing Index. Then at 11:30 a.m., we have the 3 and 6 month bill auctions, which may cause some volatility. Besides that, we have lots of jobs numbers coming out throughout the week, also PCE data, so keep that in mind. We'll talk more about those later. For now, we're just going to focus on Monday. On top of this, for tomorrow, we have Domino's Pizza and a bunch of like other stocks announcing their earnings. Most of them are going to be kind of minor for Monday. But on Tuesday, we have SoFi and PayPal. On Wednesday, we have Microsoft and Meta. On Thursday, we have Amazon and Apple. So we have lots of big tech earnings from Tuesday through Thursday. So keep that in mind. Last but not least, the fear and greed index is currently at fear. That's making up the majority of sentiments. Momentum is also at fear. There's still a lot of fear in the market, but the put to call option ratio has been dipping as the market's bouncing because we're seeing lots of these hedge funds and big institutions closing their shorts. They're closing their shorts and they're hedging by going long in the market. So keep that in mind. Anyways, what do I see for the charts right now? What do I think is going to happen from this point on? Let's talk about my predictions. So Tesla had a very monstrous 10% day after the news came out that President Trump and his administration are going to be more lenient on the launch of FSD and the robotaxi. So that was some good news. Now, there could be some momentum left as Tesla tries to go a bit higher. I do think we could try to go a little bit higher from here, but you want to be very careful as we hit this resistance around this 292 area because we had many instances where Tesla rejected off 292. And that's why I want to give you guys a warning about that. So in essence, if we're bullish, you want to see Tesla push for 292. If we break that, I think we push for 300 pretty easily. So make sure you watch those levels just to be safe. If we're bearish, you want to see Tesla reject between 285 and 292. In this range, we get a big rejection, and you want to see us basically fail at 285. If 285 does not hold on Tesla, I could see us return to like 275. And if that fails us, we dump all the way back down to like the 260s. So keep that in mind. That's going to be the more bearish case. Now, I will go over my prediction in just a second. Just know this on the daily time frame of Tesla. It's very strong on the daily, so there is going to likely be an attempt to go a bit higher. But the 200 EMA on the daily is at 287. It's going to be a little bit tough here. We also have these gaps over here to fill. So there is going to be a moment when Tesla does return to these levels. I do think that's going to happen, which is why you want to be very, very careful with the way at which we are moving. So not to be a pessimist, not to be negative about Tesla and what I see happening. I'm just trying to tell you this is what I see, at least on the charts. That's what we're seeing at least thus far. So what's going to likely happen? Okay, in my opinion, I think there's a very, very good chance that Tesla tries to go a little bit higher. I do think we might be trying to get close to about 287. And then if we break that, I could see us go to like 292. It is possible. But I'm going to be very careful once we get to about this 292 area. So my prediction is that we do push closer to like that resistance, but there might be a rejection if we don't hold support. So be very, very careful with Tesla for now, unless we end up breaking 292 to 300. So could we go higher? Yes, we might push a couple more points. We could go up to 292 or so, maybe even as high as 300 in that range. But then there's going to be a risk of us turning back down if we get some kind of rejection move, if we get some bad news from the markets. So be very, very careful on Tesla, at least for the time being. So that's what I'm talking about. We should go a little higher, but be careful at resistance. For SPY, I would argue we're still looking bullish. And the reason why is because we have a very, very clean looking double bottom here. We have one bottom, two bottoms here, right over here. Then we tried to bounce. We made a higher low. So as you can tell, SPY is trying to bounce, and we're making higher highs and higher lows for now. So we're actually looking a bit more bullish for now. But at 555, I would be very, very careful, because once we hit 555, we'll be watching to see if we get some kind of rejection move or not. So you want to be very, very careful. My prediction is that if you're bearish, you want to see us essentially lose the 545 area. If that fails us, we have a big gap to fill. I think we easily return to 535, if not 527, to fill that gap. That's the more bearish case. The bullish case is going to be that we continue to break 555. If that breaks, we're looking for like 560. Then eventually this imbalance around 565 will get filled to push us even higher to invalidate the rising wedge. So when you look at the daily on SPY, we are bullish on the daily, and we have this gap to fill over here at this 555 area. There's also another gap to fill at 527 if we get the rejection. So what do I think this is looking like? Well, if you look at this very closely, you guys will quite clearly see that we are actually looking quite good, since we have a very, very nice gap over here that's unfilled. So we all look bullish on the daily time frame. So I do think we might go a little bit higher for that 555 area. The daily 50 EMA also happens to be there. But even if we do touch 555, there's no guarantee we keep going higher, as it depends on earnings and also what President Trump says. So could we go higher? Yes, I could see 555, but once we hit that, we'll see if we consolidate a bit. We have to continue to hold that to continue to go higher. If we don't hold 555, we're going to be at risk of dipping back down to about 535. So make sure you watch your levels just to be safe, because there's going to be a risk of rejection off this rising wedge. Now, it depends on what happens with the earnings and all that. But my prediction is that we go a little bit higher. We end up testing 555, but be careful once we do that, because we could still turn back down if we get some bad news, if we get some kind of rejection. There's still going to be a risk of that. So please keep that in mind for those out there. Okay, on the QQQ, it's almost an identical setup. We have a double bottom that formed right over here. Nice double bottom. And then we're also trying to make a higher low here, which is a good sign for bulls. Now, when we look at the charts, we have a very similar setup. We have this resistance at 473. If we break that, we're looking for essentially 480 as our target. But if we end up getting a rejection, we could turn right back down depending on how well we hold up. For now, in my opinion, I think that we're looking quite bullish, and we're seeing a lot more of these buyers who are stepping in. So for now, we're looking quite good. In my opinion, I think that the odds are favoring the upwards direction, but we'll be watching to see. If we're bearish, you want to see us essentially lose 466. If that fails us, we could be dipping back down to about 454. If we're bullish, you want to break past 473. If that breaks, we're looking for an attempt to push for basically the 478 to 480 area. My gut tells me that we're making higher highs and higher lows right now, and that this might attempt to get to about 478 to 480, but there's going to be a risk of a big rejection if that ends up failing us, and we could turn back down to about the 450s if we end up seeing that move. So if we lose 466, look for a dump back down. If we hold above 473, I do think we push for basically 478 to 480. My prediction is that we push for 478 to 480 for now. We also have this imbalance over here. But there's going to be a risk of us turning back down if we get a rejection later on because of this wedge that's forming. On the IWM, we do have a gap all the way down here around 183, by the way, but there's no sign of us rejecting coming back down to fill that gap. So because there's no sign of that yet, we're not technically bearish at the time being. We're actually still looking quite bullish. So that's a pretty good sign, at least thus far. So in my personal opinion, I would argue that we're still looking bullish. We're still doing a very, very good job at getting bought back up, and we're actually favoring upside for the time being. So I do think that there's a good chance we go a bit higher, but I would be very careful because even if we do make higher highs and higher lows, I'm going to be watching to see if we get that rejection. So if we lose 189, we dump back down to 183. If we continue to hold above 195, I think we easily push for 198 to basically almost 200, and then we'll be watching to see if you reject. My prediction is we're still bullish. We try to push for 198 to 200, but once we hit 200, I'd be very careful. Once we fill this imbalance up here, we could still churn back down after that if we do get a rejection. So you want to be very careful, especially as we have this gap to fill over here. So I do think we go a bit higher, but watch resistance just to be safe. On ES, we're looking quite good. We have the same exact setup as that of SPY, double bottom, and we're also trying to make a higher low, which is good, but you want to be very careful considering a lot of different factors. So on ES, we're looking bullish. If we end up losing 54.50, we could turn back down, especially as we have a gap to fill at 5,300. My guts tells me that this is going to continue to make higher highs and higher lows like this. And then this could be actually looking for an attempt to get back up to about 55.80. So 55.80 is where we have this gap to fill. There's a very, very good chance we try to push towards that. If that breaks, I think 5,600 could be tested. But then if we reject off that and if we end up losing like 5,500 flat, then we could turn back down like this, especially as we have that gap to fill way down here. So I think that we push for 55.80 to 5,600 back up here. And then we're going to be looking to see if we consolidate. If we keep holding 5,600, we continue to push higher. If we get that rejection, we'll turn back down from there. And I do think there's going to be a risk of us turning down if we do see this wedge panning out. But of course, it depends on earnings and those factors. So I'll keep you guys updated on that. Same thing with NQ. I still think there's a bit more juice left. I don't think we're done yet. We might be pushing for essentially 19,750 to about 20,000. If we break 20,000, we're going to continue to fly. But if we reject before 20,000, there is this gap to fall all the way down around 18,300. So we could return to like 19,000. If 19,000 fails at any given moment, I do think we're going to be at risk of coming down to fill that gap. So you want to be very careful just to be safe. Bitcoin is trading right now. It's still kind of flat. The setup is in the middle. As you can tell, we're just going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. This might try to retest 95,000, but we'll see if we get a rejection back down. If 93,900 breaks, we could be turning back down. If we hold that, we could try to bounce. There's going to be a risk of us turning down, though, looking at the current setup. So please keep that in mind as there's still some weakness here. I do think we consolidate a bit longer, but then there's going to be a risk of us turning down if we end up losing support. On Tesla, we're bullish. We could be looking for a retest of 292, and we'll see if we reject or not off of that. But overall, Tesla's doing a good job at holding up. I still think we go a little bit higher on Tesla towards those resistances, but then be careful once we hit that. Will we turn back down? I'll be watching that to see if we get some kind of rug pull. So keep that in mind. On Nvda, there's a tough resistance here. We hit 112 rejected between 112 and 115 multiple times. Could we go higher? I could see us try to get close to like 115 or so, 113 to 115. But if that does not hold, we could turn back down for 105. So you want to be very careful with that coming out. For Apple, we're looking a bit more bullish with this cup and handle like structure. If we end up losing 201, we could be dumping back down towards 197. My guts tells me that this might be looking for essentially 212 to 215, but if that doesn't hold, we could turn back down for essentially 201. So could we go a bit higher? I could see us try to push for like 212 on Apple, but be careful. We'll see if we get a rejection near 213. So keep that in mind. Netflix might go a little higher. We're still bullish at this 1100 area, but be careful as we're hitting new highs. There was a slight bearish divergence developing, so you want to be careful with that. So I think this may continue to uptrend near the low 1100s. 1125 to 1150 could be retested, but be careful as we hit new all-time highs, because if we form a bearish divergence, we could still return to about 1050 to retest our 20 EMA. So could we go higher for the 1100s? Yes, we can. 1125 to 1150 is possible, but then we'll see if we turn. On Microsoft, we're bullish, making higher lows, but you want to be very careful because even if we do try to push higher, we could be retesting essentially 375 or so. And then if that does not hold, we could turn back down for like 345. So you want to be watching your levels just to be safe, especially as time progresses. For Celsius, we got this big rejection here off this bearish divergence. So we could be retesting essentially this 35 area. So could consolidate like this and start tipping for 35. So give it some time, especially as we progress. Supermicro is looking pretty good. You want to see if this could hold 36. As long as that holds, we're looking for 38. And if we lose 33, we're turning back down. My gut tells me 38 could be retested. We'll see if you reject off that or not for a move like this. So be very careful. I think we push a bit higher for that 38 area, but that's going to be previous support becoming resistance, and we'll see if you reject from there. Palantir, bullish divergence is looking bullish. I do think it might go a little higher for like 215 to 220, so there might be some upside coming. So it might push for this resistance near 120, but then we'll see if we turn back down once we hit resistance. So watch that very closely. On Rivian, we look a bit more bullish as long as we don't end up losing 12.4. I think we're actually favoring to get close to 13, and we'll see if it rejects off that or not. So be very, very careful. SoFi is looking bullish. Could be looking for 13.5 as a potential target, and we'll see if you reject. Nice breakout so far. It's still bullish, so I think 13 to 13.5 could be coming. Then we'll see if we turn back down after that to the low 12s. For AMD, we're looking bullish. Made a low here, came up, made a higher low. So this could be actually trying to target 100. And we'll see if we break that to go higher or not. It might hit the low 100s before it turns back down to like 91. So give it some time. For ARM, we're looking bullish. This could try to go a little bit higher for essentially this 115 area to 120. And we'll see what the move happens to be like. I do think 115 to 120 could come, and we'll see if we turn back down to 107. For Coinbase, we're looking bullish. We're looking for essentially a retest of this gap fill around 212 to 215. Might be pushing up there. Then we'll see if we turn back down for essentially 200. For Amazon, we could be looking for 193 as our potential target. We'll see what kind of reaction we get from there because it's going to be a tough resistance. We do have earnings coming out soon, so we'll have to see what the reaction is. But I do think that this might try to push for 193. And then we'll see if it rejects. Meta might try to retest 560 or so, but then we might see consolidation because it does love to consolidate in this range here. So it might do the same thing where it kind of pushes for like 560, maybe goes a little higher, turns back down, consolidates for a bit, and we'll see if it breaks out higher or lower depending on what earnings look like. For Microsoft, we're technically on an uptrend. Keep in mind that when it comes to a lot of these big tech stocks, they could also be affected by other earnings. So, earnings from Meta could be affecting Google, for example, right? Depending on a lot of different factors. But as we progress, Microsoft could be looking for a move closer to 400, and we'll see if we get a rug pull from there or not, depending on how earnings ends up going. But I do think we might push a little bit more. Google's looking kind of weak here. Might be retesting our EMAs near 157 to 159, and we'll see if we bounce. Look for a little bit more downside, just to be clear. DJT is kind of flat here. Might be retesting 24.6, and we'll see if it bounces. The VIX is making lower highs. It's bearish, but despite that, there's this gap over here to fill around 22. We'll see if we hold up or not. I think we might just be dipping towards that 22 area to fill the gap. And then we'll see if we get a breakout or not, depending on what these factors look like. So I think the VIX dips to 22 a little bit more because the market's going to push a bit higher, but then we'll see if the VIX gets a breakout or not, depending on how these factors look. So keep that in mind. The 10-year is kind of flat here, and then we also have the dollar. The problem I see is the dollar has an inverse head and shoulders for me, so this could be a bearish sign for the markets that maybe the market's going to form a top soon before we start to see a rug pull. We'll see just to be safe. So my view of Tesla in the markets is simple. We might go a little higher. Tesla can try to retest closer to 290 or so. 292 is where we love to go. But then we'll see if we get a rejection from there. We'll see if we reject off our resistance on Tesla and also on SPY. So keep that in mind. Anyways, I thank you all so much for listening. So please have a good rest of your day. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, guys. And I'll be back very soon tomorrow morning before market open, hopefully for another update. Until then, thank you for listening. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday and peace out.